So I never really planned on talking about this theory, but I've gotten a lot of comments about it. I mean, it's not like I'm the first to break it down. There are tons of Reddit posts and videos about this exact subject. The ladies of the Oh Yeah podcast, which is a podcast that every King of the Hill fan should be listening to, broke down this theory in detail in one of their episodes. Hell, even MATPAT, the film theorist himself, did a full-ass video on the idea, although he talked a whole bunch about punnett squares and recessive versus dominant genes, which, you know, that's cool, but I'm not here to talk about biology, I'm here to talk about King of the Hill. So I started looking more into this theory the other day after sort of outright rejecting it for years, and I gotta say, there are some interesting pieces of evidence, and after poring over the details and reflecting on the series, I do have a pretty firm stance on the theory. So, without further ado, let's discuss the most controversial yet compelling King of the Hill theory. Is Bill Dauterive actually Bobby's real father?
Hank, if I don't act honorably, there's no point in preserving my name. It's just a word that women have trouble remembering.
Now, if Bill truly is Bobby's father, that would take some serious secret keeping on Bill's part. And we've seen over and over again that isn't exactly one of his strong suits. I bet all it would take to out him is hacking into his wireless router and digging around his email for a little bit, which is why Bill should totally use Surfshark VPN. Surfshark VPN can protect your information from data thieves and secure your online life. On top of that, Surfshark can help you unlock tons of content on streaming services like Netflix by logging in through a different country. So if you've run out of cartoons to watch in the US's Netflix library, no sweat. Try out Australia or Japan. You can find shows like Rick and Morty, Archer, Close Enough, and more. One subscription gives you access to Surfshark on unlimited devices, so you can load it up on your PC, phone, tablet, Mac, you name it. Plus, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's plenty of time to make sure Surfshark is right for you. I've even got a special offer code for you that will get you 83% off and 3 extra months on top of that for free. Just go to the link in the description of this video and enter the promo code CHELLOS to get this awesome offer. All right, let's get back to this dirty gossip. So, as I said, I have to admit that there is some pretty interesting evidence in favor of this theory. When you look at it all out of context and side by side, it feels really compelling. So let's dive into it. One of the biggest pieces of evidence is just Bill's general obsession with Peggy. He's clearly strongly attracted to her, and a lot of the pro-theory crowd believes that this stems from the fact that the two of them may have slept together in the past, conceiving Bobby, and that Bill's ongoing obsession is a result of sharing this one intimate experience with Peggy and then desperately pining for another taste of that experience. And there are, admittedly, some pretty weird moments from Bill that could be seen as hints towards this idea. In Escape from Party Island, when Hank takes a trip with his mother and her friends, Bill becomes weirdly obsessed with taking care of Peggy and Bobby, like to a stalkerish degree.
You gave me a key, remember, when you went on vacation, so I could feed Ladybird.
That was 6 years ago.
He even shows up at Bobby's baseball game and starts to yell at the coach about putting Bobby in the game.
Why aren't you playing Bobby Hill? I am responsible for that, boy. You play him now! You hear me?
And this isn't even the last time that Bill gets awkward at one of Bobby's sporting events. Look at this clip from Bobby on Track.
You think Bobby's bad? Imagine if we had a child.
I would say that this is pretty typical Bill behavior, but I will also admit that Peggy's reaction is actually a tad unusual here. She looks really uncomfortable and shifts awkwardly, but generally when Bill makes these kinds of weird remarks to Peggy, she very vocally shuts him down.
I'm having a barbecue this afternoon. See you there.
No, you will not.
Is it possible that Peggy knowing the truth prevented her from wanting to draw any more attention to this idea? And then there are situations that are just even more blatant.
In a moment of weakness on a dark, rainy night, I slept with Peggy.
No, you didn't, Bill.
I know.
Yeah, this is played off as a joke with Hank shutting down Bill immediately, but Bill is incredibly weak-willed, and many could read this as him walking back his confession after Hank presses him. The gang was in dire straits, and this could have been the last chance Bill had to confess to Hank, and it's a really weird thing to say if it isn't true, even by Bill's standards. So if we're gonna continue down this theoretical path, this is where you have to look at Bill and Bobby to determine if they share any real similarities. People generally point out their appearance, both being sort of chubby with big round heads, but I think this is kind of weak evidence-wise. Bill was actually quite fit when he was younger, but there are some things that the pair share. When the crew goes to visit Bill's family in New Orleans, something very interesting happens to Bill as soon as he arrives.
Je m'appelle Bill Dauterive, je garde pour ma tante Esme Dauterive.
He instantly takes to the Cajun lifestyle despite never having really lived it. He even admits himself how unusual it is that he picked everything up so quickly, like it was a hidden memory or something.
I had no idea that you spoke Cajun.
I had no idea either.
Interestingly, in this episode, though, Bobby also takes pretty quickly to the lifestyle, to hilarious effect.
Well, I need a window seat because this flower is wilting.
Bobby certainly didn't get this from Hank or Peggy. Could it be the Dauterive in him? Bobby and Bill actually bond a handful of times over the series as well, but none is more compelling than the episode Blood and Sauce, when Bill starts to cook barbecue using the secret Dauterive family recipe. This entire episode revolves around Bill lamenting the fact that he's the last of the Dauterive line, and he won't have anybody to pass these familial traditions down to. In the end of the episode, Bill decides to pass the Dauterive family recipe on to, you guessed it, Bobby Hill. Pretty interesting, huh? And if you subscribe to this idea, then you have to start looking at it logistically. And this is honestly where I think the most compelling evidence comes in. In Pregnant Pause, we learn the entire backstory to Peggy's pregnancy and Hank's narrow urethra. In fact, Hank's sperm count is so low that the doctor basically tells them it would be next to impossible for the couple to conceive naturally.
I really don't think you'll ever have children.
Hank even refuses to try in vitro fertilization, which, side note, pretty messed up, Hank. Now, the episode explains that having a puppy, Ladybird, around the house is what made Hank relax enough to conceive a child with Peggy, but this was ultimately just Hank's opinion of how it happened. There's obviously absolutely no medical science at play here, just Hank's assumptions. I would say the astronomically low chances that Hank and Peggy could conceive a child naturally is by far the biggest piece of evidence for this theory. So if this were the case, how would this have played out? Well, Peggy was very upset at Hank when he refused to try in vitro fertilization. Like, devastated. Is it possible that in her frustration and desire to have a baby, she went to her neighbor Bill and secretly conceived a child? Now, Bill would still have been with his ex-wife, Lenore, at the time, but her extramarital affairs hardly seemed to be a secret. Perhaps Peggy used this to her advantage when trying to seduce Bill into doing this with her. That's really the only instance I can think of in which this could possibly happen, unless lots of alcohol was involved. Hell, Bill seems to know a lot about Hank and Peggy's struggles to conceive, and I think it's very safe to say that Hank Hill did not disclose this information. So how did Bill learn it? When you look at all this stuff side by side, like I said before, it's very compelling. Compelling enough for some viewers to go all in on the theory. But this is where I've got to jump in and portray the flip side, because though I think this evidence is really fun to sift through, in the end there are a lot of holes, and the lack of context for some of these situations make them appear more in favor of the theory than they actually are. For instance, if we look at the episode Blood and Sauce, the episode where Bill passes down his family recipe to Bobby, the entire premise of the episode revolves around Bill's depression over his lack of family. He is absolutely devastated, thinking that he has no real family left and that he will never have a child to continue his legacy. Now, if Bill knew that Bobby was his biological son, would he have really felt this way? Bill and Bobby have bonded on many occasions. If he knew this truth about their biological connection, certainly that would have meant something to him in this existential crisis. And yes, in the end of the episode, it did mean something, but this wasn't portrayed as anything but Bill embracing the friendship that the two of them had formed. I think if the writers were trying to tell us this biological connection subtextually, this is not how they would have portrayed it. Speaking of subtext, let's talk about his obsession with Peggy. Yes, the theory dictates that this obsession stems from a long-lost connection that the two of them had in conceiving Bobby, but other episodes of the show have basically refuted this. Bill of Sales might at first appear to support the theory, showing the lengths that Peggy would go to avoid Bill and his weird obsession with her, but after the two conquer the pyramid scheme sales world, Peggy shows the most affection for Bill she's ever shown.
You are a kind, hardworking, superhuman people person who's taking us to nationals. Oh, Bill Dauterive, I love you.
And what is Bill's reaction to this?
What are you doing? Stop it! Leave me alone! Keep the jacket, keep the pen, I quit!
Yes, this was an instance of Peggy using Bill for personal gain, but if Bill's obsession with Peggy truly stemmed from his own knowledge that Bobby is his biological son, there's absolutely nothing in Bill's past as a character that would indicate he wouldn't jump at this chance to be closer to Peggy. Instead, this episode actually explains that Bill is basically attracted to the way that Peggy negs him. She constantly belittles and berates Bill for being disgusting and slow, but the moment she changed her tune, Bill was repulsed. In order to get him back in her court, Peggy literally just starts to pre-prepare insults for him, which eventually cause him to want to help her again. Peggy has a stern, tough, no bullshit nature. It's her massive ego and the negging that comes with it that seems to attract Bill to her. At least that's what this episode depicts. And then you've got the stronger familial stuff at play here. Namely, that Bobby looks a hell of a lot like both his grandfather Cotton and Uncle Good Hank. And honestly, though people claim that Bobby looks more like Bill than Hank, I'm not sure I agree with that. It feels like people really latched on to the fact that both are on the chubbier side, but I don't think Bobby really looks all that much like Bill. In fact, when you look at the flashback in the episode Halloween, young Hank looks nearly identical to Bobby. So if you're gonna base this off of resemblance, and Cotton, young Hank, and GH all look like Bobby, I'm not sure what other conclusion you can draw. Now, I've also seen some people try to really extend the theory here by saying that maybe Cotton is actually Bill's real father. They do, after all, have a strange bond over their times in the armed forces. But to that I'd have to say, I hope you don't hurt your back from that reach, my friend. Not only does this just get into really convoluted territory story-wise, but this basically negates everything we learned about the Cajun Dauterive heritage, and ignores the fact that Bill seemingly had this entire Cajun side of him lying dormant until he visited his family. So let's talk about this from a writer's standpoint. Why would the writers want this underlying secret in King of the Hill? It's basically something that is never explicitly stated, but should inform a lot of the characters' actions. But what purpose would that serve these characters or the story? The show already openly discusses similar subjects through the Gribbles and John Redcorn. If they were doing the same thing with Bill and Bobby, did they ever intend on pulling out that rug from under us? Or was this always meant to be a background detail for fans to argue over? Do the writers want us, the audience, to be the subject of the Peggy's headache situation, where we are in fact the last to learn what everyone else already knows? I ultimately just don't see how this idea serves the fundamental core of King of the Hill, which is the story of Hank and Bobby trying to relate to each other as a father and son. It's definitely possible that they could tell an effective story in which Hank learns the truth about Bill and Bobby, but chooses to love Bobby all the same, knowing that he is in fact his true father, having raised the boy and everything. But it just feels like this is a really sweaty journey to get there. So much of the turmoil between Hank and Bobby is Hank's complete lack of understanding of how Bobby operates. And on a certain level, this is because this is Hank's flesh and blood. If that boy ain't right ultimately boils down to that boy actually being a biological Dauterive, someone else that Hank thinks ain't right, this wouldn't challenge Hank's worldview in the same way. It would give Hank a reason why that boy ain't right. But the point of the show is that Hank learns from the things he doesn't understand about Bobby. It just doesn't feel like this type of reveal would serve the nature of the show. In the end, I think the Bill and Bobby theory is fun. I had a good time digging through old episodes and re-examining character relationships, and I think if you have fun poring over the details for these theories, good on ya. Keep doing it. But for me, too much of the evidence comes in the form of confirmation bias. On top of this, there are too many contradictions to the theory within the text of the show, and the idea doesn't quite mesh with the most important themes and through lines of the series. But everyone should watch this show the way that brings them the most joy. And if these conspiracies and theories do it for you, hey, more power to you. Hey, cool news, y'all. I've started a podcast about adult animation with my friend Toonrific Tariq. It's called Cartoons That Curse, and we're covering our favorite adult animated series one season at a time, starting with the Fox seasons of Futurama. The first episode is already out, so make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel or check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.
Johnny to challenge.